Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider series. Today I'm really happy to have Sakura. She's joining us from Future Planet Capital. Sakura, welcome.
Thank you, Nicolas. It's very exciting to be here.
So let's start with a question I always ask, which is what's your journey into corporate venturing? And I know today we're going to use a wider definition of corporate venturing.
Sure, thank you. So, yeah, my journey into venturing and investment is actually through a technology background. I'm an immunologist by training. I started my career in academic research, and I think I realized very quickly on my academic journey that I wanted to be operating at the commercial end of the spectrum. And so I started to explore, other career opportunities where I still wanted to be very closely associated with, biological sciences and close to research, but I wanted to do other things around it. So the way I got into the commercial world was actually to retrain as an IP attorney. So I'm a patent attorney, but I spent most of my IP career actually in the corporate world. So I worked for biotech companies, working alongside the research teams and the management teams in building and structuring IP portfolios, protecting innovation within the corporate organizations that I worked at, working alongside commercialization teams. So doing lots of um, competitive landscaping, freedom to operate, all the contingent pieces of IP work, which led to commercial deals. So there was a lot of due diligence activities for in and out licensing and also M&A activities. And one of those companies that I worked at, we actually did an IPO in the US. We did a fundraise in the US, which was a fantastic experience working for an Australian biotech, listing a company on the NASDAQ, doing a fundraise at the same time, and at the same time managing all of the IP and commercial activities that was happening within the company as well. So that really, piqued my interest in the investment sector. And at that point, I joined a VC in Australia, which is one of the best known venture capital firms focusing on healthcare investments in Australia. And the kind of investments we were making there was really in later stage companies. So these were clinical companies that were raising, between 10 and $20 million. And what I started to realize with my kind of science, IP, and commercial experience was a lot of the times you're not making investments in certain companies, not because the technology is not exciting or the team is not exciting, but there are certain things in the early stages of the company formation and the early stages of the journeys of those companies that does not necessarily make them investable at the later stages. So it made me realize that what you do in the early stages of company formation, company structuring, where you take those early investments, is really critical for a company to be successful and grow and raise more capital in the future. So that really turned my interest to working in really early stage investment. So in the last few years, I've either been working for early stage VCs or working alongside companies that are trying to raise their first VC investment. And where I am at Future Planet Capital is just perfectly positioned for me to do that. So Future Planet, we're a venture capital firm. We're based in London. We have operations in London as well as in Birmingham, and we have three funds that operate within Future Planet. We have a regional fund which really focuses on innovation and growing the economy and businesses in the Midlands area of the UK. And then we have a national seed fund which focuses on UK innovation but building them for growth and success globally. And we also have a global fund which invests in companies at slightly later stage. It can do Series A, Series B investments, but across the world. And I focus most of my time, or all of my time, really, on the National Seed Fund.
Very nice. I have to ask because I don't think we had an IP attorney step to anyone I've interviewed. How much of what you do today, investing early stage, how much of that time as an IP attorney is useful and maybe in guiding the companies to be careful about IP?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's actually something that, similar to raising your eyebrows, it raises a lot of eyebrows when I speak to founders as well, and it's definitely something that resonates with them, and that is certainly an area in the early stages of company formations that they need help. So when we talk about our value add as a team to the companies that we invest in the early days, those sorts of things are really critical, and they see the immediate value that comes with that. So in terms of, how I use my IP skills and knowledge in what I do day to day, um, it certainly helps that, when I did my IP training and I worked in those biotech companies in the IP space, I was used to looking at not only our own technology internally, what the scientists were developing, but I was also looking at a whole landscape of competition and the network of IP that's around the areas that we operate in, right? So I think the kind of skills I developed from doing that was really to be able to spot red flags in something that we might be looking at. So if we're looking at a really cool technology and it's a competitive positioning and maybe a crowded marketplace, is there actually a position to be had? Is there an IP position to be had? Because at the seed stage, that's really what you're investing in. You're investing in a bit of IP and technology that still needs to go a long way in terms of being proven and developing in the market. So I think it's something that I use day to day, but I think it's probably something that's so inherent that I don't think about it. But
Yep.
certainly the analytical skills that come with having worked in that area, I apply every day to what I do.
And I think it's critical. We see many early stage companies that build a product, prototype, of course, and product, only to realize that it's going to be a very challenging freedom to operate space. And even if they were to patent, that doesn't give them the right to operate. So maybe you can speak a little bit so that the audience understand how important it is for early stage companies to think about the IP early on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really tricky area to navigate, because I think as investors, everybody likes to ask about freedom to operate. They always want their companies to be thinking about freedom to operate and understanding the competitive positioning that they have and other third party IP that they might be encroaching on, what they need to be aware of and what they need to be navigating. But I think it's also risky in the sense that you may be asking a question that a company is just too much in an infancy stage to be able to answer, right? So when you're talking about freedom to operate, you're really talking about a commercial positioning. So it's really something that it's a legal question, and it's something that you can only explore really when you're about to launch a product, for example. So that's very much a legal positioning. Is there anybody else with IP in that space that if I was to get into the market, I would be infringing someone else's IP? That's a very specific question. I think early stage investors and also early stage companies, when we talk about freedom to operate, what we're actually talking about is competitive landscaping. Is do you understand the landscape and the world that you're about to operate in, that you're trying to get into, that the market you're trying to create? Who else is doing something similar? Who else has got IP in this space? Who else might you need to be talking to in the early days, because you might actually find that there's some level of co-development opportunities there. They don't have to be competitors right off the outset. You can actually think about them as having something maybe complementary. Maybe there's something we can be achieving by working together. So I think in that respect, it's really important for early stage companies to be doing that assessment of understanding where else there's IP and technology being developed that might be similar to what you're doing, but not completely then go into panic mode that, oh, I've suddenly got a freedom to operate issue. I need to completely redesign my product strategy or technology development strategy, but actually just understand, what is the underlying message here in terms of IP and competition.
Thank you. Now, you talked about learning about all the challenges for early stage formation and how critical it is. So we talked about IP. What would be the next thing that you feel is so critical for entrepreneurs to know and for investors to be careful about?
The so I the kind of areas that I work in within the National Seed Fund, I'm working, with founders who have never set up companies before, who may be thinking about spin outs and startups as their this is the first time they've thought about spin outs and startups, right? They've never considered that as a commercial path in the past. And so I actually spend a lot of time with the founders to try and understand where do they fit into the startup journey. Once you recognize that, yes, this technology is really fascinating, it's really interesting, there's a market there, there's obviously some development challenges. We understand technology risk being seed investors. and we know that there's proof of concepts potentially still to be established. But at the core of that has got to be the founder. This is the founder that's owned this project for any number of years, has been very successful in the project that they've been leading. But what is their continued involvement once the company is formed around this technology that they've been working on? And I know that every investor talks about we invest in teams, right? I think at the seed stage, it is very much about the team, because even if the founder is not going to be the CEO or the CTO or any kind of C suite position in the company, their support and their energy is really important for that to be successful. So we tend to see, any combination of involvement from the founders in the companies that we support. In They could be founder CEOs, they could be founder CTOs, or they could be on an advisory board, they could be on a consultancy basis. And so actually understanding where those founders see themselves in the company and how they continue to add value is really, really important, because I think that's so critical to the success of a business.
Now I want to talk a little bit about your background, where you mentioned how closely you work with research teams. And clearly you invest in deep tech and entrepreneurs who are sometimes pure PhD, right? And then they have the technology, they're looking at the market. Can you share about your experience in the past working with research team and how useful it is today for you as an investor in technical entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. I can actually give you hopefully an amusing anecdote for that. I spent a brief period of time working in a business development capacity for a research institute early on in my commercial career. And I distinctly remember speaking to, a world-renowned cancer researcher about her research. And, I was in the business development team trying to see what kind of licensing opportunities or company formation opportunities there might be for her technology. And I distinctly remember her saying, I'm trying to answer these questions in a way that you wouldn't understand them, because I really don't have time to be talking to BD, and I need to get on with what I need to do. And I don't, this to me is a waste of time, is essentially what she was saying. And I need you to go away. Right. Um, and so what I took away from that was, it was actually something that I've built throughout my career and I continue to build, is you need to have a level of curiosity in what your founders are doing, and you need to want to learn. And I really think that, my career to becoming an investor, the path that I've followed, I couldn't have become an IP attorney without having had the scientific background. And I couldn't have gone into commercialization without having science and IP. And I couldn't have become an investor now without having all of those pieces that stack up. And, every time I feel like I've made so many career changes, but I actually haven't. I've just been building the blocks to becoming the investor, and the kind of investor I want to be. And I think that's really important, because founders ultimately are very passionate about their technologies, right? So they need to know that the person that they're talking to on the other side of the table, who's an investor, who's ultimately going to be focused on return and making money, is equally passionate about the technologies that they're investing in, and that they can sit and have a conversation, obviously not as the expert on every type of technology that we see, but that we can actually have enough curiosity to learn about it and understand it, and actually recognize that the entrepreneurs and the founders are the experts in it. So we're going to lean on you to help us understand it a little bit more. But I think one of the other things that we do really well, and I think something that sets us apart, particularly, in the National Seed Fund within Future Planet, is we have a panel of consultation members that we use while we're, building our pipeline, but we're diligencing our deals and taking them through our investment process. And these individual committee members are experts in, a number of different sectors and industries. So we draw on them, on their expertise in the individual spaces to help us understand the technologies in the market as well. So it adds a huge amount of value to us as the investment team. I mean, we have a very strong investment team, and I'm really proud of being part of that team, but we still can't know everything. So we draw on our network to help us with that. And it also then makes that network available to our founders and our entrepreneurs that we're backing. Is we kind of present the companies to our consultation committee. they quiz the teams. They try to explore, why is this interesting, why is this exciting, why is this a good thing for Future Planet to do? How does this actually sink in with what the kind of investors that we're supposed to be? So there is a huge value add that comes to us as an investment team, but also to our founders as part of that.
So I want to double click because it feels like the superpower of Future Planet. But you mentioned advisory board and consultation committee. Are they the same or are they different?
Sorry, could you say that again? So investment and consultation committee, was that
So you
your
mentioned
question?
the advisory board and the consultation committee.
Yeah, sorry, I do use them interchangeably, but it is the same thing.
Okay, so I want to double click because it sounds like a superpower where this advisory board allows you to due diligence better which startups to invest in. But once you invested, then they can come to the support and guidance of the startups to be even more successful. Can you talk about this superpower?
Yeah, no, it's a really nice way to describe it as a superpower as well, because we certainly treat them as a superpower for us. So while we're kind of going through the investment process and diligence on the companies that we want to invest in, we use the consultation committee to help us define some of the questions that we should be asking. Sometimes all investors do this, right? We get to that point where we're so excited about something, and you're such strongly convicted to something that you may not see a red flag on the side there that you should have seen, or you haven't asked one question that's really critical to the decision making, or you haven't thought about one particular angle when it comes to market positioning or something. And so it's really nice to have someone independent of your investment team to test you on that, and also to help you think about that again a little bit more objectively. Um, but even as part of that, even before we've made investments, we introduce the companies to the consultation committee members, because in terms of our kind of impact led investment thesis, even if we decide we're not going to invest in a company, we can still add value to them. We take them through a diligence process where we're giving them active feedback all the time, we're quizzing them all the time. So it becomes part of that process for us. So we don't necessarily say that we've come to a position where we're not going to invest in you, so we're not going to continue to add value. But I think there's a power of network we can make available to companies even we don't immediately invest in. But once we've invested, certainly the whole Future Planet family is available to our portfolio companies. We do try to be proactive in engaging our portfolio companies. And, one of the reasons I joined the fund is because there was that focus on actively supporting the portfolio. We have a portfolio manager, and he's 100% dedicated to supporting our companies post investment. So yeah, it's something that we treat as being very important.
So I feel like this is a golden nugget, which is really about how you bring that value before and during the investment. I also really like what you said about bringing value even if you don't invest, which I think most financial VCs, as soon as they decide not to invest, they try to move on as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
Um, so can you tell us maybe some examples? Because I feel like this is a really good best practice. Because at the end, you're here for the entrepreneurs. And if you can be helpful, even if you don't invest, you should. So maybe
Mhm.
you can share some best practices about how you can be helpful, but yet manage your time carefully.
Yeah, excellent question. Because we all have a finite time to work with, right? And we're all bandwidth constrained, and we all always say that our team's too small to be able to support the number of people that we would like to support. So I think prioritization is obviously very important, right? And we would naturally prioritize um, the companies that we're actively thinking about investing in and have actively invested in. So that does take priority. But it doesn't take much time to be able to say, you're not right for us, but we know three or four
Mm.
people who've been in a similar situation to you. Let me just send an email and introduce you, because I think you would have a very meaningful conversation. And it's about creating that community. And it's also about not feeling like you need to hold everything in, and you don't need to have that power of and control of knowledge to feel like you're the most important or valuable person in the room. And creating that collective mentality and value. So, an active example for me at the moment is I'm looking at a company at the moment that's UK based and at the seed stage. And the CEO that's just been appointed to the company is someone that's known to the fund. This person has been a CEO of a company that we've exited before, and that network and community is so important because people recycle into your community, right? You may not invest in somebody right now, but you don't know that they're not going to create the next company that you want to invest in, or they're not going to introduce another company to you that you might want to invest in. So everything kind of comes back in, I think, in so much more value than you might feel like you're creating in the first place. And that's, in terms of impact-led investment, that's so much more valuable to founders sometimes than purely the money that you give them.
I think building good karma really makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you mentioned something which we do have in TDK Ventures, which is all about engagement team and platform team. But you mentioned the role of portfolio manager. Do you mind explaining a little bit this role and what does it do to your portfolio?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we appointed a portfolio manager recently into the team, and the value add from having this person on the team. He's only been with us for about 4 months, but the value that he brings to the team is just astronomical, and to the point where some of my colleagues who've been in the fund for a very long time are wondering how we functioned before we had someone like this on the team.
Wow.
And I think there's a few things that come with that, and I think one of the really important things that comes with that is that it allows us to be objective of our portfolio, right? So as investors, when you've done a deal, you're of course going to be very passionate and very supportive of the company. And as seed stage investors, we know that our companies are going to go through several rounds of investment. They're going to go through a long journey, and we want to be able to support them for as long as we can, but we can't participate in every round. We can't continue to invest in them. So having somebody who's actually, looking after the companies and giving them the support they need without the investor, the deal lead, actually having to be involved at every round of that conversation does provide that objectivity, I think, and he's very good at handling those relationships, and it's a little bit arm's length. And I think sometimes it's also really difficult, but really important for portfolio companies to hear no. No, your seed investor is not going to invest in you in one more round. What we can do is we can look at the network of investors that we have. We can look at syndicates that we've formed before, and we can make introductions to other investors. The other things that we also do that's very proactive and engaging with the companies is when the companies are ready to go for their next round of investment, we do invite them back in to run their business plan by us, run their pitch decks by us. That we can do in terms of polishing those up and shaping those up, and also being the friendly investor because we're an existing investor. We can look at those and be very, very open with you on how you want to message where you are now as a company. We saw you at inception, we saw you as the first investor, and we now know the development cycles that you've gone through and where the value inflections have been created for the business, so we can help you build that narrative. So we do that as well, which is nice. I think our companies definitely like that.
Yeah, it's another golden nugget. We do the same at TDK Ventures. We offer to do very friendly pitch. I mean, we already invested, we're already in, and they come and practice their pitch, and they know it's going to be a friendly. I mean, there's some tough love sometimes, but it's a friendly feedback about you forgot to mention about sustainability. You don't mention this, and so I think this is a really good value add that investors who invest early on can help to think about how to convince the next level of investors who are more later stage, they expect different things, and therefore make sure the messaging and the storytelling fits.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I really like the synergies between TDK and Future Planet. I think we need to work together.
We have to. Let's talk about syndicates. I think that's a good segue. How do you think about building syndicates for the rounds you invest early, but also how you think about syndicates for the next round, where maybe you're not involved?
Yeah, good question. And maybe we go with the second part of that first. So when we're making an investment into companies, we're already thinking about the next round, right? We're always thinking that companies are going to graduate beyond how much we can give them, and we know how much they're going to raise at the next round. And it's certainly a conversation that happens with our companies before we invest in them. Is you're going to get to this, these sorts of milestones, these sort of value inflection from your seed round. What do you think your Series A needs to look like? Where does your growth need to be? Where does your global expansion go at your Series A? And are you thinking about the kind of investors you want to bring on board at that point? And I think, it goes back to the heart of what we do, which is impact-led investment, is we want to make sure that our companies, when they're going to Series A, are thinking about who else is going to invest, that they're going to bring something to the table that doesn't exist anymore. If I'm going to have an investor represented or investment represented at the board, what do I want them to bring to the board that I don't already have around the table? What network are they bringing? What doors are they going to open for me?
Mm.
So I think that conversation does happen, at the time of us investing, and I think that's a really important conversation. Um, but going back to the first part of how you build that syndicate and what conversations are you having at the seed stage, like I was saying earlier, every investor wants to co-invest with somebody. You want to share that risk and you want to share that journey with somebody else at the table with you. That's certainly very important for us. It's actually something that we measure ourselves on, the kind of co-investment that we bring into our companies alongside our own money. And it's part of our success metric as well. So it's really at the heart of what we do to be able to bring other investors with us. We like to lead investments. There's no reason we can't lead investments, and we do that quite a bit. And so, having done that for a very long time, certainly team members of mine have done that for a really, really long time, a lot longer than me. We have a great network of investors that we've worked with time and time again, or at least have discussions with time and time again. And and it's nice, when you have those relationships and you can pick up the phone to people and have a conversation. And I think what's important for us is also, while we will have the conversations with co-investors, I don't ever take the approach that I'm going to pitch this company to a co-investor, right? We don't do that. What we do is we'll have the conversation and say, look, it's you need to meet the team. You need to see the company for yourself, see what you think. But this is why it's exciting to us. And that certainly, that warm introduction certainly helps. The calls happen, the meetings happen, and things can move pretty quickly. And I think because we also have the experience of leading deals, when we make those introductions, I think there's a level of expectation that of the quality of diligence that's gone into an opportunity and into a deal. So we can, where there's real interest, we can sort of pull those syndicates in fairly quickly, which is nice.
And I'm guessing part of that is, of course, your credibility and your track record. But also, I'm assuming that as your partners go into due diligence, you're able to share some of your due diligence.
Yeah, we do, and that's a case by case basis, of course, and everyone is careful about how you share that diligence and
Yep.
what kind of tricky challenges that might come with it. But yeah, we absolutely do that, and like I said, there are investors that we've worked with time and time again, so there is that comfort that we're able to do that.
Very nice. And I find your approach very intentional. And one key element you mentioned is building the syndicate carefully is part of your success matrix, kind of your KPIs, which means that you're very clear that this is how you want to do it, and that's how you're going to measure success. So, what are the most important KPIs or success metrics you have when you think about new investments?
Yeah, I mean, we measure ourselves on a few different things, and the most important things, I think, are uh, the boosting of UK innovation, right? So I do focus all my time on the National Seed Fund. We are focused on UK innovation, UK companies, but we're focused on helping them grow globally. We want them to be, global businesses. It's about finding those hotspots of innovation around the UK. And it's very easy to get distracted with, the Golden Triangle, and Oxford, Cambridge, London,
Yep.
and focus on those things. But there are other areas that we of the country that we focus on, and most of the people in the investment team, we're on the road a lot because we really want to go and see our clients and see where the companies are coming from, see where the innovation is coming from, and so that means that the benefit to the economy and the kind of jobs that we create in those research centers and those hotspots around the country is something that we measure ourselves on. And I think the companies that we've backed to date, we've created something like 1,100 jobs across the UK. The co-investment piece, of course, the co-investment, not just at the time of our first investment, but also in subsequent rounds. How have our companies done in future rounds? And I think our companies have raised something like £800 million in co-investment in subsequent rounds. So, I mean, these are significant numbers that we can really be proud of, right? And that will just continue to grow. Our fund is continuing to grow. We're £110 million at the moment for the National Seed Fund. We're $450 million assets under management across Future Planet. So it's going to continue to grow, and those numbers will go up, which is very exciting.
And I think this is where we touch on what I said earlier at the beginning, which we will be more loose on the definition of corporate venturing, but your limited partners are not looking just at financial returns. They are looking at the strategic value of getting UK innovations out and to go global. And that defines your success metrics as a consequence. And the fact you knew it was £800 million and so many job creations means you're tracking that success stories.
Absolutely. We track it. Our LPs want us to track it. We want to talk about it because I think these are really important metrics for us to recognize. I keep talking about being seed stage investors. You are on a really long runway on some of these companies to an exit, right? So I think it's really important for us as investors to communicate to our investors, but also to the wider community, that there are so many different ways of measuring success for a fund. It's not just about return on
Yeah.
investment. And so the value that we bring alongside what might feel like a really small pot of money to someone who's going to participate at the Series A, Series B round brings a huge amount of value alongside it.
And I think maybe we'll discuss that offline as we think about partnership. But if clearly one of your mission is for your startup to go global, that's probably where you want to work with corporate VCs that are beyond the UK and that are global companies. So maybe this is your chance to the audience. Some of them are corporate VCs. What it is for you that you're looking for in terms of partners as corporate VCs for your startups?
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a role, in my commercial past. I can go back to my past again, where I worked for a pharma company. I was working on the business development side, but we worked very closely with the corporate venture arm. And the conversation that happens, I mean, I'd already had sort of a foray into investment before that, so I knew the value of working with the venture arm, right? And honestly, it's an open door. They want to talk to business development people. They want to talk to scientists within their organization to understand what the strategic fit is. And I think understanding that strategic fit is really valuable in the corporate venture side. It's very exciting to get. It's very easy to get excited about lots of new technologies, but ultimately, that fit is so important to them, right? It's at the core of what they do. And I think those open conversations from early stages is really useful to have. And I think corporate venture, when I was in business development, talking to corporate venture to say, if you were to think about this as an investment opportunity, we're thinking about it as an acquisition or an in license. But if you were to think about this as an investment opportunity, where would this sit on your scale of interest? If we said opportunity X, project X, really exciting, but we feel like there's a little bit more work that they need to do. They need a little bit more money to develop it to a certain point. Is that something venture arm could invest in? And then there's kind of a route into business development, right? So where those open conversations are happening, I think there's a lot of strength. And so for us as investors, private investors who would love to work with corporate venture, it's that openness about the strategic fit from day one that's really, really important. It's equally important, like founders and other investors. Like if it's a no, we want to hear no quickly. If there's no strategic fit, we know quickly. But if there is a strategic fit, but it just needs a little massaging, we need to think about, maybe there's a little, critical proof of concept experiment that needs to be done and that needs to be funded. We want to know about it. So I think that's where we can work a little bit more closely together, where maybe corporate venture doesn't have to be quite so guarded in what might be their strategic areas of focus, or certainly emerging strategic areas of focus. Things that are already in their focus is pretty obvious maybe, but what are they thinking in the future? What kind of emerging technologies are they thinking about investing in the future? Because investors like myself who are working at the coalface, really working with founders and scientists and research organizations, uh, probably have a little bit, I'm going to say, easier access to some of those emerging technologies. So maybe a conversation on what does the future look like in the corporate world, so we can start building those businesses.
I'm going to use a technical term, but I nearly feel like you play an impedance match between your entrepreneurs and the corporate VCs to know how to connect, when to connect. I think the timing is also quite critical, and also making sure that there's some patience in terms of maybe it will take a bit longer for this corporate VC to engage, but we feel confident there is a strategic fit. We feel confident this is going to happen.
Right, exactly, or where it's not a strategic fit, equally important to know.
Yeah. I always like to say strategic is about deciding what not to do. And for startups, they need to know very, very quickly when not to spend time. And so they can really spend time where it makes most sense. So maybe you can talk also about the value of you and your colleagues being on the board of the companies you invest, because governance and strategic value of a board is very different, very early stage versus public companies. So maybe you can speak to what is the value add you have when you're on the board of this very early stage company, especially as they are thinking, maybe they dream about going global, but they need to start thinking first steps first.
Yeah, it's like such an important question and such an important topic for companies to address, right? Because a lot of what we would see and the kind of things that we invest in are platform technologies, are technologies that have, so many applications, so many different markets that they can explore. But what is it that they focus on? What's the core thing that they need to prove to say that this is actually something valuable? This is actually now demonstrated that it can do something where it's solving a real world problem. And I think, similar to me pivoting in my career 3 times, it's not uncommon for early stage companies to pivot, right? And I think that pivot is important. And I think for founders to recognize really early where something is not going to work is really important as well. And I think when you're talking about the ability to build different applications from a core technology, a lot of what I tend to see is where that reduction to practice and that proof of concept, it has happened in areas where they have immediate access to things that they can do. They can create a prototype that fits a certain application because that's what their organization is structured to do. That's where their expertise is. Or, if you look at it in the biotech sector, they may have developed a product for a certain indication because they have the right models available to test those molecules in those models. What's really important is to not lose sight of the underlying technology and what it proves. That's what you're trying to do at the seed stage, is you're trying to remove that technology risk at the core, right? So you almost have to remove yourself from the biggest market and think about the immediate market and talk about where where is my biggest demonstration of value from this technology within the confines of the team that I have, within the confines of that capital I have access to. So I think, to your question about what is the value of the board at that point, is really to be quizzing the companies and asking the critical questions on it. It just sounds like, are you sure? Are you sure this is what you want to do? Are you sure this is a good idea? But beyond that, it's the question of, we invested in a company. on a business plan that looked like this? And are we actually tracking against those deliverables? Are we tracking against those milestones? Now, if we need to stop and think about whether those are still the right milestones and right deliverables, let's have a conversation at the management, at the board level. And it needs to be an open conversation, and it needs to be able to then progress into something that is a better fit. You don't want to stagnate, and you don't want to keep going against a milestone that's never going to happen, because that there's just no value in that. So I think the value of the board at that point is exactly that, is to continue to quiz the management team and the founders to say, we believed in your business plan and we believe in you as a team, but where this is kind of deviating from the original strategy, let's actually think about whether the original strategy still fits, or we need to think about pivoting for a completely valid reason.
I think one more golden nugget, which is when you're asking, are you sure? It's not you're doubting. You actually want the entrepreneurs to really have conviction or to think carefully and consciously, is it time for a change? And
Right.
so I think asking the right question is probably where the most wisdom comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to the team that I said I'm really proud of being a part of, we are a very diverse team at Future Planet. We all come from, we have very different backgrounds. We've got life science specialists, we've got economists, we've got data scientists, we've got engineers, we've got lifetime investors. The team is really diverse, and we all bring a very different skill set to the table. And so, even when in the deal making process, we're very robust in our discussions about individual deals, and it's because we come from different experiences, different backgrounds, and I think our company certainly benefit from that as well.
So here I need to understand some of the best practices because diversity for me is the base. But to leverage diversity, you need that inclusion of everyone's diversity of thoughts. Can you share maybe some tips about how you challenge each other, how you reach conclusions, how you diverge and converge? Any tips for the audience?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the diverge and converge is a really important one, right? Because I think to be a highly functioning team, you don't all have to agree all of the time, and in fact, you're actually a better performing team when you don't agree all of the time, because
Yeah.
you can't possibly think exactly the same all of the time, right? And that's certainly something that's reflected in the way we conduct our investment committees. So the investment committee, the voting members are four members, and we do tend to have very robust and informed discussions on all of the deals, and we vote. We try to get to a consensus. We try to get all kind of voting members supporting a deal, and the reason I say that is because any member of the investment committee that's not supporting a deal usually comes at it with fantastic reasons for not supporting the deal. And they're not saying, I don't support this deal, we're not going to invest in it. They're saying, I don't support this deal because I think you need to answer X, Y, and Z question. Help me understand this, convince me, talk to me about it, right? And so we treat each other the same way we would treat our founders, is convince me of a deal, convince me why this is a good idea, and convince me on how it actually it creates a portfolio for us. That portfolio construction is really important, right? And so I don't think we could do that without having a combination of uh, all of those sort of technical backgrounds that I spoke about. We've all come at it from a completely different angle, but we've also been in the investment sector for different periods of time. And the most senior members of the team are equally willing to learn from the junior members of the team who've come from a different background. So it's very much a flat structure type conversation when it comes to those investment decisions and deals pipeline discussions. And I think that's so encouraging. I think that's just really nice to see, and it's part of the part of what we do that's really valuable, I think.
It's impressive. So maybe I should ask, how did you manage to get to that diversity, which touched on recruitment? So maybe you have best practices in terms of recruitment too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, our team has grown quite a bit in recent times, and we would like to say that we haven't had to think about diversity quite so much because uh, we've all been the best people for the job, and here we are, right? That's great. But at the same time, there has been an active thought into introducing that diversity. We want more women. We want more senior women on investment teams. So it's really nice for me to come in as an investment director, as a senior member of the investment team. We have two other female investors on the team. We have people who've you know come from different areas, different parts of the world. And in fact, we went through this exercise the other day as a team on how many of us have lived in more than one country. And
Wow, I mean,
most of us on the team have lived in at least two or three countries through the course of our lives. And so just that life experience that comes with that, the humility that comes with that, and I think the empathy that comes with that, that not everyone looks, sounds, and thinks like you, is really great. And we genuinely like spending time together, and we like to know about each other. So I think all of that is really valuable. But yeah, it was a very interesting exercise when we went around the room and said, where's everybody lived? We have someone on the team that's lived in 7 different countries. I mean, that's just fascinating, right?
it really is. Yeah. Now, I forgot to ask, how many portfolio companies do you have today?
Good question. So we have 56 portfolio companies in the seed fund, active companies.
Wow. Okay. So now I'm impressed you waited until 4 months ago to get a portfolio manager.
Exactly. It was definitely a resource we badly needed, and we're definitely capitalizing on his value add for sure.
Now, with so many portfolio companies, do you plan any events where they meet together, they can share best practices? Do you have anything that's about building a community between these entrepreneurs?
Yeah, brilliant question. And it's a work in progress. So we're definitely focusing on building that community, because I think one of the things that's really important at the early stages is feeling like you're not alone, right? Particularly for your
Mm.
first time founder CEO,
Early stage, first
to
time.
right, to feel like you you've sort of taken the leap of faith to become the CEO of a company, and you're not alone. There are so many other people that are exactly like you. And so for us, it's very much about creating that safe environment where they can learn from each other. So we do things like introduce our founder CEOs and also management teams to leadership programs where we actually put cohort companies together. We encourage them to have leadership training or leadership programs where they can engage with each other, learn together, learn to grow together. And that's really nice, because if we ever have an event or a workshop or anything, they kind of come together and they say, hey, I haven't seen you since the last event we were at together, or the time we did the leadership training. So that's really nice for us, because as much as we'd like to say that we bring all the value to the teams, we don't, right? They bring value to each other, and there's nothing better than them learning from each other. And the other thing we've also just started doing, and we did this for the first time about a month ago, is we had a Partners Day. So Future Planet Partners Day, we brought together all of our LPs and our special partners, but also a number of our portfolio companies to meet each other. It's like, you're all part of the one family with us. We're the investors. We're putting your money to work into these companies. So come and talk to each other, come and get to know each other. And that was a full day event, and it was so successful, and the energy was so fantastic that we had a casual sort of drinks event in the evening, and we thought, people have been here since 8:30 this morning. There is no way they're going to stay in the evening. Everyone's exhausted. Everyone was still there. It was a beautiful sunny day in London. Who knew? And everyone wanted to stay and continue to have these conversations, and that was really, really powerful for us, because I think that says we're doing the right thing in terms of building that community around the companies that we invest in.
Very nice. And when we talk about UK, you mentioned the triangle with Cambridge, Oxford, London. Can you talk a little bit for
Mhm.
the audience about which other cities really have good entrepreneurs, good university spin-off, and so on? Because we always talk about the triangle, but not beyond, and there's much more to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason we have a Midlands fund, right? There's a reason we have a regional fund. The level of entrepreneurship and innovation that happens in the Midlands is amazing. And I think, there are centers like Birmingham where innovation is actually born out of an industry need. This is where it's very industry rich. It was very manufacturing rich. So there's obviously, pain points that come from those sorts of sectors that really kind of drives innovation in those areas. And so there's hotspots like that around the place. So there's things happening in Southampton, which is on the south coast, and Portsmouth, where there's, obviously there's a rich Navy history in the country. So there's a lot of innovation around those areas. Manchester is another big industry center and hub in the country. So there's a lot of innovation happening up there. And in fact, Bristol, you probably know about Bristol. People probably heard about Bristol. People would know what's happening there. So there are so many hotspots. And I think, there's a lot of investment and there's a lot of activity to support innovation ecosystems, particularly in the north, in the UK at the moment. So I spend a lot of time going up there, actually. There's a lot of fantastic research campuses where there's some really cool things happening. Particularly last week, I had the joy of going into a particle accelerator. Being a biologist, I never thought I'd be able to go into a particle accelerator. So these are the kind of things that are happening in the UK that you can think that's fascinating, and I want to be a part of it. So it's really cool.
So you're traveling a lot with your colleagues, getting to meet entrepreneurs locally, checking their lab, their science. Maybe you can share a little bit about, so you mentioned investment committee, you want to drive consensus, but still you have to make decisions sometimes that are contrarian. It's not obvious. How do you invest when it's a bit too much contrarian?
Uh, Sometimes it's simply putting a stop to the conversation, right? When you go into a committee and you've kind of come with a purpose. It's like we've come to an investment committee, we've come with a purpose, and we need to make a decision.
Yeah.
Purpose to make a decision sometimes drives behaviors, and it drives the fact that you need to get to an end point. And it doesn't have to. It can be a conversation. And we have done that as a team before where we've said, this is clearly not the committee where we're going to make a decision. So let's actually turn this into a conversation where we understand each other's concerns around the deal. We understand where we need to do a bit more homework and a bit more diligence, and let's come back for a decision, right? So I think that's the best thing that we can do. And because we are a small team, we're a team of 9 people, nothing should come as a surprise. We work closely together all the time. So you can, I think, avoid it's simple communication. You can
Yeah.
avoid those surprise moments when you go to investment committee for a decision, for example, and make sure that you're kind of constantly communicating with each other and not get to that point. But like I said, actually just turning the conversation to say, okay, this is a point where we're not going to reach consensus, where we're not going to be all in favor of an investment. Let's actually turn it into a conversation where we're learning from each other and figuring out what is it that's not working here.
So one thing I like about what you described is when you invest, you're already thinking about the next round syndicates. And so maybe this is a good chance for you to share how you think corporate VCs or even VCs should reach out to you and the value you bring. Clearly, you have early access to the full UK, many, many cities, many entrepreneurs. But what is the value that you bring and what is the value you expect them to bring?
Yeah, excellent question. And I think the value that we bring is, even though we're making seed stage investments, we're looking at companies that are going to grow and that are going to exit, right? So we're thinking about who's the acquirer, who's going to want this at the end of the day, right?
Mm, mm,
Everybody
mm.
thinks about the B2C model. Okay, I'm going to cure something for a patient. Yes, okay, I get that. But who's going to make that happen? Who's the person in the middle that you're going to have to convince? And who's that acquirer of your technology that's going to make that happen? So I think we have those conversations very early with the companies. And what's really important for us is that we don't scare our companies and our founders by making them think that they need to know the answers to those questions. They need to think about the questions, and the idea of getting the right seed stage investors and partners on board at the early days is about who's going to help you answer those questions, who's going to build that community and that network around you to help answer those questions. And I think that's where kind of early engagement from CVCs is hugely valuable to investors like us, because we can understand those strategic areas of interest, and we can start, building pipelines, building portfolios that actually are going to have that kind of growth potential with CVCs are participating at the next round.
Very nice. And then we just set up an office in London, so we are clearly biased. But can you make a pitch why UK versus the rest of Europe, or how do you see it?
Ah, yes. Okay. That is a really tricky question for an Aussie to answer, of course, who lives
Maybe
in
it's
the
more
UK.
natural that way.
Perhaps, yes, perhaps. Um, one of the things that I found when I moved from Sydney to Oxford, I live in Oxford, is I thought I was going to move to an investment community and an innovation community that was going to be so big and so diverse. I'm not going to know anyone. This is going to be really scary and daunting. And it's actually not the case. It's actually quite a small community. It's a very friendly community. People like to work together. People like to invest with each other, and people like to talk to each other. So I think there is that really nice kind of it's a small community. Everybody talks to each other. Everyone knows each other. People, you see the same people at networking events, which is nice. The
Yep.
conversations are continuous. So I think even though the kind of technologies that we're seeing and the kind of innovation that we're seeing is so diverse and the applications are so diverse, there is still a core group of people who are investing in really nice, exciting technologies, right? And new areas and new innovations. So I think the accessibility in the UK makes it really exciting. Accessibility to entrepreneurs, but accessibility to investors, and the excitement of growing companies in the UK. And I think there's huge potential to continue to grow things in the UK. And I think there's hopefully more money coming into the ecosystem to be able to make that happen. So yeah, that was a really like personal kind of heartwarming experience for me coming from Australia to the UK, thinking this is actually not as scary as I thought it was going to be. It's actually quite a nice ecosystem.
So good nugget instead for the audience. If you want to come to the UK, you know it will be warm and welcoming. So my last
Right,
question,
exactly.
yeah, my last question, Sakura, is what are you excited about next?
What am I excited about next? As a fund, we have lots of new investments to make. We are hunting for new technologies, new innovations, new founders, but we're also hunting for those seasoned and experienced management teams that want to come in and create new companies in the UK. So come and talk
Mm,
to us, come and join us. It will be lovely to be on the journey with you, because what we're seeing is loads and loads of opportunity for new spin outs, that we're working with, and also some really exciting new companies. So what we would love to do is to see more more later stage investment happening in the UK. And so the translational stuff is staying in the UK and companies are continuing to grow. Obviously, there's a natural progression for companies to go global and they might need to set up operations in other parts of the world. But let's actually maximize the potential that's here. Let's continue to grow things, build the teams here, and see what we can do within the community that we have.
very nice. Sakura, thank you for sharing your journey, your insights, and quite a few golden nuggets along the way.
Thank you so much.